Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today I will analyze the case of Jamal Wali. First, I'll look at the background of this case, move to the timeline of the crime, then offer my analysis. Jamal Wali was born in the late 1980s and lived in Fairfax, Virginia. He had a wife and 4 children. Earlier in his life, Jamal had worked as a translator for the U.S. forces in Afghanistan. He came to the United States in 2014. In 2018, Jamal was arrested after failing to obey a traffic signal. He was charged with felony eluding and resisting arrest. Jamal also found himself facing charges of misdemeanor assault and destruction of property. At one point, a judge suspended his concealed carry permit. All the charges against Jamal were dismissed, apparently as part of a mental health diversion program. Despite his numerous legal problems, in the state of Virginia, Jamal was still permitted to open carry a firearm. He carried a Glock semi-automatic pistol in a holster on his right hip. His belt also had compartments for 2 additional magazines on his left hip. Jamal carried his weapon without a cartridge in the chamber. On April 18, 2025, Jamal was pulled over for driving on a suspended or revoked license and failure to have his vehicle inspected. This did not discourage him from continuing to operate a motor vehicle. Now moving to the timeline of the crime. On April 23, 2025, 36-year-old Jamal Wali was driving his 1999 Toyota Corolla near the Greenbrier Town Center in Fairfax, Virginia. At 2:36 p.m., a Fairfax County police officer pulled him over on Majestic Lane after noticing that the inspection sticker on Jamal's windshield had expired. Instead of pulling over like a typical motorist, like gradually slowing down, Jamal slammed on his brakes and came to an abrupt stop. When the officer approached the driver's side window of the Toyota to talk to Jamal, he said, "That was a heck of a stop, sir." Jamal responded, "I have a gun and I'm armed. Why did you pull me over?" The officer explained that his inspection sticker had expired. Jamal started using expletives and was clearly agitated. He said that he did not have a driver's license and he refused to give the officer his name. Jamal wanted to know why the officer was treating him this way. The officer used his radio to request a supervisor. As he was doing this, Jamal said, quote, "I can't even go back to my country because of you blanking people," unquote. The officer asked if he had the registration for the vehicle. Jamal indicated he did not. He then said, quote, "You blanking people brought me to this blanking country, and I'm dying every single blanking day," unquote. After explaining how he had 4 children, Jamal said, quote, "I can't get a job, I can't get disability, and they took my blanking license because I am not able to pay the insurance. So why are you blanking trying to kill me?" unquote. Once again, using his radio, the officer said that the subject was armed and refusing to give his ID. Speaking to Jamal, he said, "Don't reach for anything, dude." Jamal responded, "I'm telling you, don't reach." The officer explained to Jamal that he lawfully stopped him, but Jamal disagreed and accused the officer of lying before saying, quote, "Today is the day, buddy," unquote. As he was saying this, Jamal placed a small camera, like a GoPro camera, on his passenger seat. It was pointed toward him and the officer. Jamal then continued complaining, saying that he was brought to this country and lost everything. He said, "The system is blanking broke." The officer responded, "Well, it sounds like you're going through a really rough time." Jamal said, quote, "I should have served with the blanking Taliban," unquote. He explained that since 2014, he was more concerned about Americans because they lie and play games. At this time, 2 other officers could be seen approaching in their vehicles. Their lights and sirens were activated. The officer who pulled Jamal over said he didn't want to get him rattled. The other officers were responding because Jamal had been reaching for his gun. Jamal did not seem to be fazed. He invited the officer to bring as many people as he can. In what might have been an effort to appease or distract the officer, Jamal handed him some type of card, presumably a form of identification. The 2 other police officers approached on foot. One of them stood on the driver's side in front of the officer who originated the traffic stop. The other officer took a position on the passenger side of the vehicle. At this moment, Jamal retrieved his Glock semi-automatic pistol from the holster on his right hip using his right hand and used his left hand to cycle the action. Again, Jamal carried his weapon without a cartridge in the chamber, so he needed to cycle the action to make the weapon ready to fire. He needed to chamber a round. One of the officers who had just arrived, the one on the driver's side, grabbed Jamal's arm, but was not able to prevent him from firing. Jamal fired one round, which struck both of the officers on the driver's side. The same bullet hit each one of them in the arm before striking a parked car across the street and shattering its rear window. Jamal tried to fire the weapon a second time, but it malfunctioned. The officer on the passenger side, named Ian LaChapelle, shot Jamal multiple times. After being shot, Jamal attempted to cycle the action of the pistol, presumably so he could continue the attack on the officers. He became incapacitated before he could complete this task. Jamal was taken to a hospital where he was pronounced dead. The two officers who were shot in the arm were treated at a hospital and released. Now moving to my analysis. Here are my thoughts on a few areas that stood out to me in this case. Item number 1. At a press conference, the police indicated that an investigation into the shooting was being conducted. Presumably, the shooting will be determined as justified. Ian LaChapelle fired not only in self-defense, but in defense of the two officers on the driver's side who were struck by Jamal's gunfire. This officer was put in a terrible position. There was a lot of weight on his shoulders. As the only uninjured officer, he had to neutralize Jamal himself. Nobody was going to come to his aid. At the same time, Ian had to aim very carefully because in order to eliminate the threat, he had to fire in the direction of the other two officers. In my opinion, Ian LaChapelle was not only justified, he was a hero who saved the lives of his colleagues. If Ian had not used lethal force, Jamal would have cleared the malfunction in his weapon and continued firing. Item number 2. Is there anything that the officer who originated the traffic stop could have done better? Overall, I think this officer did a pretty good job. After realizing that Jamal was armed and agitated, it appeared as though the officer tried to buy some time for help to arrive. He did not want to escalate the situation while he was alone, and of course he did not want to let Jamal go. In this agitated state, Jamal could have caused harm to innocent people. The officer had to deal with Jamal at that traffic stop. This situation needed to be resolved there. As is the case with all high-stress law enforcement encounters, the ideal course of action can be debated, but in my opinion, I was surprised that the officer did not draw his weapon as soon as he believed Jamal was reaching for his weapon. Right, wrong, or indifferent, many officers under these same circumstances would have found themselves pointing a gun at Jamal. Again, I think that this officer was just trying to de-escalate the situation, which is admirable, but there is a limit to the utility of that tactic. The officer may not have recognized just how agitated Jamal was. As far as Jamal's other interactions with the criminal justice system, he should have never been allowed to possess a firearm. Again, at one point his concealed carry permit was suspended, but Jamal did not lose the right to open carry a gun. If he had been forbidden from possessing a weapon, this fatal encounter could have been avoided. Item number 3. What do I think happened in this case? This is just a theory, my opinion. Jamal Wali helped the U.S. military as a translator in Afghanistan and was rewarded for his service by being allowed to start a new life in America. At first, he may have been pleased with this, but over time, he struggled to meet his goals. Jamal believed that he lost everything and that Americans were liars. He felt betrayed by the people he had once assisted. These feelings only intensified after he found himself in trouble with the law. His financial problems led to him operating a motor vehicle illegally. 5 days before the fatal encounter, Jamal was pulled over by the police. His license was invalid, and his inspection had expired. Despite this, Jamal chose to break the law again by continuing to drive. On the day of the shooting, Jamal was very frustrated to see the flashing lights of a police car in his rearview mirror again. He was reaching his breaking point. I don't believe Jamal intended from the beginning of the traffic stop to make this his last day on Earth. If he did, he would have quickly cycled the action of his pistol before the officer made it to the driver's side window. Jamal would have been ready to shoot. He knew that not having a cartridge in the chamber would delay how quickly he could deliver lethal force. Instead, Jamal was hoping the officer would let him go on his way. He was going to give negotiation a try, but Jamal wasn't very good at negotiating. He ranted about how terrible America was and accused the officer of not listening to him. In reality, the officer was listening, but Jamal was not being reasonable. His agitated state and armed status made the officer understandably fearful. This is why the officer requested backup. Even though the officer deployed de-escalation techniques, the presence of the other two officers pushed Jamal over the edge. He knew that he was not going to escape responsibility this time. He decided to go out in a blaze of glory to get revenge for his difficult experience in America. The lesson learned in this case is that police officers often deal with people who are on the verge of snapping. They become the target of explosive anger, which has simmered for years. Those are my thoughts on the case of Jamal Wali. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Much of the time, the police encounters that make the news are the ones that involve an officer making a mistake, like when an officer shoots somebody who they should not have shot. There is, understandably, a lot of concern about officers breaking the law, about officers using force which is not necessary. And there is a problem with this. Certainly there are legitimate cases where police officers have gone too far, where they have made serious mistakes. I think this sometimes overshadows the cases where officers use force justifiably. In the case of Jamal Wali, the officer who shot him did not have a choice. That officer actually saved other lives. And as far as just letting Jamal go, which is the argument that some people will make, that the first officer should have just let him go, Jamal would have been a problem for other people potentially. Those police officers stand between dangerous individuals like Jamal and innocent citizens. They are the ones in the line of fire. That means that sometimes they have to use deadly force. I think it's important to consider both types of cases. Ones where officers should not have fired, where they're not justified, and ones where officers were justified. Some police officers are nothing short of heroes, and that is easy to lose sight of when dealing with all the negative stories about law enforcement. The case of Jamal Wali is an example where a police officer did what must be done. This officer did not have any choice. Sometimes lethal force is necessary.